Welcome to the deep dive. We're starting off with a pretty fascinating question today. How could just one person actually fulfill all these really detailed prophecies, things written down, sometimes over 500 years before they were even born, by lots of different prophets?
It's a big question, and it really invites us to look closely at these historical claims, doesn't it? This idea that ancient predictions lined up perfectly with later events. So our deep dive today, we're going to explore some specific prophecies about Jesus. We'll look at how our source material presents their, remarkable fulfillment. And we'll consider what the source suggests these detailed alignments actually mean about his nature.
Right.
We're basically looking at how the source interprets specific ancient text prophecies written centuries back and then connects them to historical accounts, arguing for this very literal, very precise match.
Okay, understood. So the first thing that jumps out is just the sheer scale of it all. The source kicks off with a quote from Hebrews 10, verses 5 to 7.
That's the one. It says, when Jesus came into the world, he said, "Lo, I come. In the volume of the book it is written of me, to do thy will, O God." And the source really emphasizes the timeline here. Over 500 years before Jesus' birth, multiple prophets.
Yeah, and the claim is that only Jesus fulfilled them all.
Exactly. The source puts it quite strongly. It's impossible for one person to fulfill so many detailed and extraordinary prophecies unless he's truly the one spoken of.
That's a bold statement. Impossible. For anyone maybe skeptical, how does the source support that beyond just, the number of prophecies? What's the argument there?
Well, it's really interesting how the source focuses on pulling together all these different pieces of information from across centuries. It's not just one vague prediction. We're talking about detailed, specific things that are presented as hitting the mark perfectly in just one person. The source basically argues from probability, saying the odds of all these specific, uncoordinated predictions just accidentally lining up in one life are, astronomically low.
So statistical improbability is key to their argument for impossibility.
Precisely. The complexity, the specificity, the source uses these as evidence that it points towards something beyond mere chance, towards a divine origin.
Okay, that definitely sets the stage for digging into the specifics. Precise, intentional fulfillment. Which brings us to the first one. The source tackles a really well-known one, the virgin birth. It points to the prophet Isaiah, chapter 7, verse 14. It says, "Therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel."
Right. And the source immediately connects this to the New Testament, specifically Matthew 1:22-23. Matthew describes Jesus' birth and then states very explicitly this happened, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, "Behold, a virgin shall be with child and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel."
And then Matthew adds that interpretation.
Yes, which being interpreted is God with us.
God with us. Okay, so that interpretation of Emmanuel really adds another layer to the claim the source is making about who Jesus is.
It does. That name, Emmanuel, isn't just presented as a name. In the source's view, it's a direct statement about deity. God taking human form, being physically present with humanity. It ties the prophecy's detail directly to an assertion about divine identity.
Wow. Okay. So let's move to the second specific prophecy the source highlights, the place of birth.
Another very specific one.
Yeah, from the prophet Micah, chapter 5, verse 2. It gets really precise. "But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah."
Tiny town, basically.
Exactly. "Yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me, that is to be ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting."
And again, the source points straight to the fulfillment in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. It confirms, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king." So the location matches.
What's really interesting here, and the source makes a point of this, is that contrast. Bethlehem Ephratah described as little among the thousands of Judah, a small, relatively unimportant town.
Humble significance, as the source puts it.
Yet this place is supposedly pinpointed as the birthplace for this prophesied ruler in Israel. Feels unexpected, like picking a tiny village for a king's arrival, not the capital city.
Absolutely. And the source argues that this choice isn't accidental. It suggests it underscores a kind of divine approach, that the ruler's true significance isn't about earthly power or, a grand setting. It comes from somewhere else entirely.
So it redefines what ruler might mean in this context.
Exactly. It shifts the expectation away from worldly power towards something more transcendent. This fits the source's argument that the humble setting actually points towards a non-earthly, maybe even divine origin. It's a paradox that reinforces the claim.
And that brings us to the very last part of that Micah prophecy, which feels incredibly significant. It describes this ruler as one whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. What does the source make of that phrase?
Yes. Connecting this to the bigger picture, that phrase, from of old, from everlasting, is presented by the source as, well, a very clear statement about his divine nature. The interpretation given is that it implies he existed before time itself began.
Before time began.
Yes, the source material explicitly states he existed before time began, and it uses this phrase as a key piece of evidence distinguishing him.
So no ordinary human could be described that way, as someone whose goings forth have been from everlasting.
That's precisely the source's point. It presents this language as setting him apart, indicating an existence that transcends normal human experience and time itself.
So the overall conclusion from the source, looking at these examples.
The collective insight presented is that these and other prophecies in Scripture affirm his deity, demonstrating that he is himself God who took on human form. And that phrase, from everlasting, is highlighted as particularly strong scriptural evidence for that claim, according to the source.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap what we've covered in this deep dive. We looked at two really specific prophecies highlighted by our source. First, the virgin birth, predicted in Isaiah 7.12.
Connected to Matthew 1, and the name Emmanuel, meaning God with us.
Right. And second, the prophecy about his birthplace in tiny Bethlehem Ephrata from Micah 5.2.
Linked to Matthew 2.1, but also containing that really powerful phrase about the ruler's origins.
Whose goings forth had been from of old, from everlasting. And the source argues that this kind of precise, detailed fulfillment spanning centuries, especially with language like from everlasting, points directly to and affirms Christ's deity.
Yes, the source presents the consistency and the sheer specificity across these ancient texts as remarkable and uses it as compelling evidence for his conclusions about divine identity.
So, for you listening, maybe something to think about. What does it really mean to consider a being whose existence is described as being from everlasting? How might a concept like that challenge or maybe even expand your own understanding of time, of origins? It's definitely a thought to mull over.
For more information on how you can grow spiritually using Rhapsody of Realities, please visit our website, www.rhapsodyofrealities.org, or you can also visit rin.rhapsodyofrealities.org/salvation. Thank you.